In psychology, they say love can either heal you or study you. I didn't believe that until I met her. Her name was Dr. Evelyn Hale, though she never told me she had a PhD when we first met. She just said she worked with people. She laughed easily, listened deeply, and had that kind of presence that made you feel like every word you said mattered. I told her things I'd never told anyone. My fears, my regrets, the parts of me I usually kept locked away. And she never judged. She just smiled softly and said, "That's exactly what I needed to hear." It felt like fate, like she understood me better than I understood myself. When she looked at me, I didn't feel seen, I felt studied. But I mistook that for love. I thought maybe that's just how intelligent people love, with questions, not promises. At first, everything was perfect. She moved in within a month, saying it just felt natural. She rearranged my books by color, replaced my old mugs with matching glass ones, filled the apartment with the smell of vanilla and fresh paper. It was peaceful, like living inside a laboratory that pretended to be a home. She had rules, though, little ones that felt harmless at first. Don't touch my laptop. Don't answer calls after midnight. If I ever leave suddenly, don't follow me. I laughed about it, said she was mysterious, maybe a little eccentric. But every time I asked what she actually did for work, she'd change the subject. "It's complicated," she'd say, "and you'd see me differently if I told you." One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to find her sitting by my desk, headphones on, whispering into her recorder. Her voice was calm, precise. I caught a few words. Subject: shows consistent attachment, reinforcement, mild, dependency, observe, control, variable, stable. I froze. Subject: she was talking about me. When she noticed I was awake, she smiled. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, like nothing had happened. I didn't confront her that night. Maybe because I didn't want the truth. Maybe because a part of me already knew. The next morning, I pretended to forget it. But I started watching her more closely. She kept a locked drawer in her study. Her phone had no notifications. Every day at exactly 6 p.m., she wrote something in a small black notebook, then hid it under the floorboard by her nightstand. One evening, while she was showering, I lifted the board and took it out. My hand was shaking. Inside were notes written in neat, methodical handwriting. Experiment 47B. Emotional conditioning through intimacy. Subject: male, 31. Status: responsive. Progress: promising. Emotional dependency forming faster than projected. Avoid disclosure for now. Possible phase 2 initiation pending next trigger event. Trigger event. That phrase felt like poison. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it wasn't love. When she came out of the shower, she looked at me, hair dripping, towel around her shoulders, and smiled like she could read my thoughts. "You found it, didn't you?" I said nothing. She sat beside me, still smiling. "You were never supposed to open that. But I suppose curiosity is part of why I chose you." "Chose me?" I asked, my voice breaking. Evelyn tilted her head. "You really thought this was about love?" The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear my heart beating in my ears. She stood, put on her robe, and whispered, "Don't ruin something important just because it feels uncomfortable." Then she left the room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, tried to convince myself I was wrong. But the evidence was everywhere. In her tone, in her questions, in the way she never really said "I love you" unless I said it first. I was an experiment, a test, a study of what happens when love isn't real, just data collected through affection. And yet, even after reading everything, I couldn't leave. Because deep down, part of me still loved her. Or maybe that was just another part of her experiment, working exactly as planned. After that night, everything changed quietly but completely. Evelyn acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee every morning, kissed me before work, texted me reminders to eat. But there was something new in her eyes, a stillness, a kind of cold curiosity, as if I'd finally become interesting again. I tried to act normal. I laughed at her jokes, sat through her therapy talks, listened to her analyze people like they were chess pieces. But inside, I was crumbling. Every smile she gave me now felt rehearsed, perfectly timed to make me forget what I'd read in that notebook. A week later, I came home early from work. Her car was outside, but the apartment was dark. I walked in quietly, my stomach tight, and I heard voices, hers and a man's. The door to her study was slightly open. His responses are getting stronger, she said softly. More emotional regulation, less resistance. The jealousy markers are right on time. A man chuckled. You're pushing it, Evelyn. If he finds out too much. He won't, she interrupted. He loves me. They both laughed. That sound, her laugh, the same one that used to melt me, now felt like a blade. When I walked into the room, she didn't even look surprised. The man beside her, older, sharply dressed, turned away as if this was a normal part of the experiment. What the hell is this? I said. Evelyn's tone was calm, too calm. You weren't supposed to be home yet. I pointed at the papers on her desk, graphs, photos of me sleeping, transcripts of our conversations. You're recording everything? Every word, every move. She sighed, as if I was being dramatic. You're overreacting. Overreacting? My voice broke. You wrote that you were conditioning me. You lied about everything. She stood, closing the file. You make it sound so cruel. But what we have, it's important. It's not fake. It's just useful. Useful. I laughed bitterly. I'm not your project, Evelyn. I'm a person. She tilted her head. You're both. The man finally spoke. Maybe it's time to pause the sessions, he said quietly. Evelyn shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. No, he's too close to breakthrough. I looked between them. Breakthrough? What does that mean? Neither of them answered. The man just grabbed his coat and left, avoiding my eyes. Evelyn turned to me and smiled. That same small, patient smile she always used when she wanted to make me feel guilty. You shouldn't have come home early, she said softly. That night, I packed a bag. She didn't try to stop me. In fact, she helped, folded my shirts, handed me my toothbrush, saying things like, you'll be back. You always come back. Her voice wasn't threatening. It was confident, like she knew me better than I knew myself. And she was right. I lasted 3 days. 3 days before I started feeling the pull, the silence, the absence, the weight of her voice missing from my head. It was like withdrawal. Every thought I'd circled back to her, what she'd say, how she'd smile, whether she missed me. That's when I realized something horrifying. She hadn't just studied me. She'd programmed me. Her experiment wasn't about love or control. It was about dependency. How far you could push someone before they stopped being a person and became a subject who couldn't function without you. I wanted to hate her, but even that felt like something she'd planned. Because hate kept me thinking about her. She once told me, love and hate come from the same root, attention. And now, even when I wasn't in her arms, I was still hers. I tried to break free, blocked her number, deleted her photos, even left the city for a while. But on the 4th night, I got an envelope under my door. Inside, a small note written in her perfect handwriting. Phase 2 begins when you think you're safe. That's when I knew it wasn't over. Not even close. I came back because I told myself I wanted closure. But deep down, I came back because I couldn't stand not knowing what she was doing without me. Evelyn didn't just live rent-free in my mind. She owned the place. When I walked into the apartment, she was sitting on the couch like she'd been waiting for me all along, her legs crossed, her eyes calm and knowing. I told you you'd come back, she said, almost kindly, like she was talking to a child. I didn't answer. I dropped my bag and just stared at her. The apartment was spotless, too spotless, like she had prepared it for this exact moment. The smell of vanilla and paper was back, the same scent that had once felt like comfort, but now made my stomach twist. I read your notes. I said finally, my voice shaking but firm. I know what you've done. Her expression didn't change. And yet, here you are, she said softly. Isn't that interesting? I wanted to scream at her, but the calm in her voice pulled me in again, just like it always did. She stood up, came closer, and placed her hand gently on my chest. You're trembling, she whispered. That's not anger. That's fear. Or maybe confusion. Her tone was analytical, detached, like she was describing an experiment result. I pushed her hand away. You can stop pretending you care. I know you don't. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, a small smile curving her lips. If I didn't care, I wouldn't still be studying you. I wouldn't still be here. Studying. I repeated, my voice bitter. That's all it is to you, isn't it? Observation. Control. Notes in a file. Her smile faded. You think I don't feel things too? That I haven't lost control? For the first time since I met her, she sounded almost human. Her voice cracked, just a little, and she sat down on the edge of the couch. I thought I could keep this professional, she said. I thought I could be objective. But then you started affecting me. It was so easy to want to believe her. That's what made her dangerous. She knew exactly when to sound fragile, when to drop her mask just enough to make you question your own memory. I stayed standing, arms crossed. You're lying again. She looked up at me, eyes glistening. If I were lying, would I have risked everything? The project? My career? I hesitated, just for a second, and that was all she needed. She stood and stepped closer, her voice low and trembling. They wanted to replace you, she said. They said you were unstable, that the data was compromised. But I told them no. I told them you were different. What are you talking about? She shook her head, whispering, I didn't mean for this to go that far. But when you left, I realized how empty everything felt. You think I don't know what dependency looks like? I created it, and now I have it too. I didn't believe her. Not completely, but part of me wanted to. She had this way of making every word sound like a confession and a manipulation at the same time. I couldn't tell which was which anymore. Then stop, I said quietly. End it. Burn the files. Delete the research. She looked at me for a long time, like she was weighing something. Then she said, I can't. Not yet. They know. And if they find out I broke protocol, they'll come for both of us. Both of us. The way she said it made it sound like we were on the same side, like the victim and the scientist were suddenly partners in a secret war. That night, I didn't leave. I told myself it was to make sure she wasn't lying. But the truth was simpler. I missed her. Even knowing what she was, I missed her. I hated myself for it. But that didn't change anything. She slept beside me, her breathing slow and steady, like nothing was wrong. In the dark, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself that I'd end this tomorrow, that I'd expose her, her experiment, her lies. But then, sometime after midnight, I felt her hand slide across my chest, her fingers tracing the shape of my heartbeat. You're still mine, she murmured in her sleep. And I realized I wasn't fighting her anymore. I was fighting the version of myself she had built, the one that couldn't live without her. The experiment wasn't over. It was only evolving. I spent the next few days pretending everything was normal, pretending I believed her. Evelyn was calm, radiant even, as if she'd just been handed the final piece of a puzzle only she could see. I played along, smiled, ate dinner with her, even let her hold me at night. But every touch made my skin crawl. I was waiting, observing, learning her rhythm the way she'd once studied mine. I started taking photos of her notes, saving her recordings onto a hidden drive. I wanted to gather enough proof to show the world what she'd done, that I was not insane, that she had built me, broken me, and turned my emotions into data. But Evelyn always seemed one step ahead. The night I thought I had everything, she changed the locks on her study. Then, a week later, my laptop stopped turning on. When I took it for repair, the tech said the hard drive had been wiped clean. Every file, every screenshot, every trace gone. My backup drive, too. I confronted her that evening, trying to sound calm. You erased my files. She didn't even look up from her book. I don't know what you're talking about. I had proof, Evelyn. Proof of what? She asked, smiling faintly. That you imagined things? That you couldn't handle the relationship? Stop pretending, I snapped. She finally met my gaze, her expression soft, almost pitying. Ethan, do you hear yourself? You're unraveling. You're paranoid. You've been sleeping 3 hours a night, accusing me of things you can't even explain. Her words hit me harder than I expected, because she said them like she believed them. And worse, she made me question whether I was still sane. That was her real power. Not what she said, but how she said it. Calm, measured, never defensive, like a therapist helping a patient realize their delusion. The next day, 2 officers showed up at my door. Evelyn had filed a complaint. She said I'd been emotionally unstable, harassing her, and making threats. I tried to explain everything, the notes, the experiment, the manipulation, but the more I talked, the worse it sounded. There was no proof. Everything I'd collected was gone, every message deleted, every file erased. The officers warned me to stay away from her. I laughed bitterly. Of course she got to you too. They exchanged a look that said it all. The kind people give when they're looking at a man who's lost touch with reality. That night, I went to her apartment. Not to hurt her, not even to confront her, just to see her one last time. Her lights were on. Through the window, I saw her sitting on the couch, crying into her hands. The man who had visited before, the one from a research team, was holding her, comforting her, whispering something I couldn't hear. I stood there in the dark, watching the performance. She'd won again. She had made herself the victim, wrapped in sympathy and light, while I was the shadow outside the window. The next morning, I got a call from her number. I answered, hoping for, I don't know, closure. But it wasn't her voice. It was his. Evelyn doesn't want any more contact, he said. She's terrified of you. You need to move on. Then, just before he hung up, he said quietly, you should have known you were never the only subject. My stomach turned cold. I drove back to the apartment, but it was empty. The furniture, the books, even the smell gone, as if she had never lived there. I searched online for her name, her credentials, anything. But Evelyn Hale didn't exist. No record, no employment, no degrees, no publications. It was like she had been erased too. For days I wandered around, haunted by her voice, by the feeling that I'd been living inside someone else's design. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected to see her name again. Every dream I had was a replay of her hand on my chest, her whisper, "You're still mine?" Then, one evening, I got a small brown envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a USB drive. I plugged it into a borrowed laptop, heart pounding. There was only one file, a video, Evelyn, sitting in her study, staring straight into the camera. Phase 3, she said softly. Observation of subject post-control. She smiled. You think you escaped, Ethan, but freedom is just another variable. Let's see how long it takes before you come back. The video ended. I sat there in the dark, shaking, trying to breathe. Because behind her, on the wall, was a calendar, and tomorrow's date was circled. Under it, in her neat handwriting, were 2 words. Final session. The next morning, I told myself I wouldn't go. I repeated it over and over like a mantra. I won't go, I won't go, I won't go. But by noon, I was already driving. My hand shook on the wheel. My chest felt tight, like something invisible was pulling me forward. Maybe it was fear, maybe curiosity, or maybe she was right. Maybe freedom really was just another part of her design. The address led to an old building on the outskirts of the city. Glass cracked, roof half collapsed, the kind of place that looked abandoned even when it wasn't. The door was unlocked. Inside, the hallways smelled of dust and faint perfume, that same scent that always clung to her. Vanilla and paper. My footsteps echoed as I moved down the corridor, heart pounding harder with every step. Then I heard it, her voice. Calm, composed, clinical. You came. She was sitting in the middle of the room, surrounded by whiteboards covered in handwriting. Notes, graphs, my name circled over and over. Cameras lined the walls, blinking red. I froze in the doorway. She smiled faintly, tilting her head as if she'd been expecting me all along. I knew curiosity would win, she said softly. It always does. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but my throat felt dry. Why are you doing this? She didn't respond right away. Instead, she gestured to a chair across from her. Sit. You've earned the final session. I didn't move. Afraid? She asked. No, I lied. She smiled. You should be. Slowly, I sat down. She picked up a recorder, pressed a button, and her voice turned professional, detached, clinical. Final observation. Subject has returned voluntarily. Emotional state, conflicted. Body language suggests hesitation mixed with unresolved attachment. Proceeding with termination phase. Termination? I repeated, my heart pounding. She looked at me. No smile, no warmth, just pure calculation. Every experiment has to end. Yours went further than I expected. You reached dependency faster, resisted longer, relapsed harder. It's fascinating. I clenched my fists. You destroyed my life. Her eyes softened for the briefest second. I gave your life meaning. Before me, you were drifting. Now, everything you do has purpose, me. You're insane. She laughed quietly, the sound echoing in the empty room. You keep saying that. But you came back, Ethan. You always come back. I came to stop you. You can't stop what's already complete. I stood, knocking the chair over. I'm done being your test subject. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes glimmered with something almost delighted. No, you're not. Because the real experiment isn't about control. It's about what happens when control is taken away. You think I manipulated you. But tell me, Ethan, what are you doing right now? Who made you come here? Me? Or you? I froze. She leaned forward, whispering, see, even when I'm gone, I live inside you. You can't tell where you end and I begin. I wanted to hit her. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just stood there, trembling. She turned off the recorder, her voice suddenly soft again. You can go now. The study is over. I stared at her. That's it, she said with a faint smile. You're free. I didn't believe her. I walked out, slammed the door, and never looked back. Or at least I tried not to. For the first few days, I felt like I was waking up from a coma. The world seemed real again. Food tasted like something. Music didn't sound hollow. I started sleeping without nightmares. But then little things. I'd smell her perfume where it shouldn't be. Hear her voice in my head when I was alone. Once I saw her reflection in a store window, standing right behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. I told myself it was paranoia, that she'd finally broken me. But 2 weeks later, I got an email from an unknown sender. No message, no name, just a video attachment. It was the same footage from that last session. Me shouting, her calm. Except this time, the video had been edited, cut, and rearranged to make it look like I was the aggressor, the abuser, and she was the frightened therapist. The captions read, Study on Emotional Manipulation, Real Footage. It had over 2 million views. She hadn't destroyed me in secret. She had made me her final paper. And as I watched the comment section fill with strangers calling me a monster, I finally understood. Phase 3 wasn't about observing me. It was about making sure everyone else did. I spent the next month trying to prove I wasn't who that video made me look like. But it didn't matter how many emails I sent, how many messages I wrote. Nobody wanted to hear the truth from the violent man who attacked his therapist. My friend stopped answering. My boss asked me to take a leave of absence. Even my landlord began leaving notices at my door like he was scared to see me in person. Evelyn hadn't just taken my life, she'd rewritten it. I started tracking every trace of her online. I went through hundreds of psychology research databases, old journals, experimental programs, anything that might contain her name. But the deeper I searched, the stranger it got. There were no records of a Dr. Evelyn Hale. No degrees. No licenses. No publications. It was as if she never existed. But then, one night around 2 a.m., I found something buried deep in an archived academic forum. A post from 12 years ago titled Emotional Dependency and the Repetition Model. It was signed by E.H. and described a private study funded by something called the Valis Program, an independent initiative exploring attachment conditioning through behavioral immersion. The post mentioned a Phase 3. My chest tightened when I read that phrase. And then I saw the last line. Subjects exhibit prolonged identity distortion even after the relationship ends. Subjects, plural. It wasn't just me. The next morning, I created a fake email and wrote to the contact listed under the program's original funding. I didn't expect a reply, but I got one. A single line. Meet me tonight. Don't come alone. The address was in an industrial area, an old warehouse on the edge of the river. I almost didn't go, but curiosity, or maybe obsession, pushed me there. When I arrived, the place looked deserted except for a single light flickering behind a broken window. I walked in cautiously, my heart pounding. A voice came from the shadows. You're late. It was a man, mid-40s, gaunt, eyes sunken. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in months. You're here about Evelyn, he said. How do you know her name? I asked. He let out a hollow laugh. We all do. Behind him, in the dim light, I saw a board covered with photos. Not of her, but of different women. Similar faces, different names. Each one connected to a string that led to photos of men. Men like me. She changes her identity every few years, he said. Different names, different research fronts. Always the same experiment. Always the same outcome. I stared at him. You're saying she's done this before? He nodded. Dozens of times. And every man who tries to expose her ends up destroyed. One drank himself to death. One disappeared. One, he hesitated, was found hanging in a motel room. Police called it suicide. My stomach turned. And you? What happened to you? He looked down. She called me her first successful trial. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The air was heavy, thick with silence. She's not working alone, he finally said. The VALIS program isn't one person. It's a group. They run these tests under different names, different institutions. They collect data, tweak methods, release papers under pseudonyms. Evelyn's just the most effective operator they've ever had. Then why are you still alive? I asked. He gave a tired smile. Because I stopped fighting her. I stopped existing where they could find me. He pulled out a flash drive, sliding it across the table. Everything I've gathered. Names. Locations. Patterns. If you really want to end this, you'll need to become invisible too. I looked at the drive in my hand. It felt like holding a bomb. He leaned closer. You can't destroy her, Ethan, but you can expose the system that built her. Just don't make the same mistake we did, thinking she ever cared. When I looked up again, he was gone. The chair he'd been sitting in was empty. I stood alone in that hollow warehouse, the rain echoing through the roof, clutching the drive like it was the last piece of proof that any of this was real. That night, I opened the files. Dozens of folders, hundreds of pages, subjects, photos, transcripts, detailed behavioral reports. Different men, different lives, the same ending. The last folder was labeled 47B. That was mine. Inside was everything. My messages, my therapy notes, my recordings, even a final video that had ruined my life. Only one file hadn't been opened yet. It was labeled Termination. I clicked it. A short video played, a grainy shot of me sitting in my car outside the warehouse just an hour earlier. Evelyn's voice whispered over the audio, soft and calm. Phase 4, awareness. Let's see how long he survives it. The screen went black, and somewhere in the dark, I realized the experiment never ends. I didn't sleep after that night. I couldn't. Every sound outside my apartment felt staged. Every message on my phone looked like bait. I deleted everything, packed what I could carry, and disappeared. No more cards, no phone, no trace. I became what they never expected, invisible. For weeks I lived like a ghost, reading through the files on that flash drive until I knew every word by heart. Each subject story followed the same arc. Contact, connection, control, collapse. They always thought they were special, that she loved them differently, hurt them differently, but it was all the same equation. Emotional isolation plus attention equals dependence. The moment they questioned her, she shifted the narrative, turned herself into the victim, and left them to self-destruct. I saw myself in every one of those men, but I also saw something else, her pattern of mistakes. Every experiment left a trail, fragments of accounts, hidden archives, encrypted data tied to the VALIS program's network. She erased people, but not her own pride. She liked leaving signatures, tiny, perfect ones. So I started building my own pattern. I created a new identity, not to hide, but to infiltrate. Using the data she left behind, I found one of their recruitment ads. It wasn't labeled VALIS, of course. It was disguised as a grant for social neuroscience research in controlled environments. I applied under a fake name, pretending to be a behavioral analyst looking for work. 2 weeks later, I got a reply. A meeting. The woman who interviewed me looked like Evelyn. Not exactly, different hair, different smile, but the same eyes. Calm, unshakable, predatory. She asked simple questions, too simple, the kind that feel harmless until you realize you've told her everything. When she asked, "Why do you want to work in emotional conditioning?" I smiled and said, "Because I've seen what it can do." She smiled back, that small, satisfied curve I knew too well, and said, "You sound like someone we could use." They let me in. Inside the program, it was worse than I imagined. Rows of screens, digital profiles of subjects in progress. Men and women in different countries, monitored through hidden microphones, therapy apps, even dating sites. Everything cataloged under numbers instead of names. 47B, 61A, 72C, experiments disguised as relationships. And then I saw her, Evelyn, on one of the screens. She was still running trials, this time under a new alias, Dr. Lyra Hensley. Same smile, same eyes, same voice. She was talking to someone new, subject 83D, a young man, maybe mid-20s, already showing the same signs I once did: confusion, devotion, surrender. I watched him fall into her words like I once did, and something in me snapped. For months, I had imagined revenge, exposing her, destroying her, making her feel what I felt. But in that moment, watching her work, I realized she didn't fear pain. She fed on it. What she feared was irrelevance, losing control of the story. So I gave her a new story. Using her own network, I uploaded fragments of the experiments, coded messages, journal entries, partial videos. Not enough to prove anything in court, but enough to make the world doubt her. To make journalists chase her name. To make the program scramble to contain the leaks. I left breadcrumbs everywhere, each one tagged with her alias, her style, her language. And when the chaos started, I sent her a single message through their internal system. Phase 5. The subject writes back. For the first time, she broke pattern. She went silent. No response, no counter. Just gone. A week later, half the network vanished, data wiped, locations cleared, funding trails cut. The Valis program folded in on itself like it never existed. And maybe it didn't, not in the way people think. Sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, rebuilding somewhere new, waiting for another subject. Sometimes I hope she is, because now so am I. I still see her in dreams, sitting across from me with that same calm smile, asking, "How does that make you feel?" But now I answer. I tell her everything. I tell her she created a monster that learned her rules, memorized her tricks, and then rewrote the experiment. Because the truth is, she never studied love. She studied power. And in the end, she taught me how to take it back.